Hey everyone, welcome back to The Natural Keep, where we talk about prioritizing keeping a spiritually, physically, and emotionally healthy home. Today I'm going to be talking about everything that you need for a natural, healthy postpartum healing time. So postpartum healing time is something I'm very passionate about because I feel like it's so lacking in Western society. So I say like in America. I know this because I've read some other books of what other countries do, and I'm like, how have we not realized that we just really are not great at caring for mamas postpartum? We're just not. And there's just a lot of like quick fixes and like, here's a spray, here's a this or that. And it's just very medicalized, honestly. Like many things about birth is very medicalized here in the Western society, whereas in other cultures, it's just a very natural thing. It's a natural process. It's something that happens. It's part of life. And that includes the healing time. And there are other women that come around you in other cultures, and there's certain foods that you're gonna be eating and not eating. And we don't do a ton of that here in America. So I am no more qualified. I am not an expert on any of this. I'm no more qualified than just having had my two birth experiences and postpartum times with my sons. I birthed both of them here at home. At our home, we did 2 home births, actually right in this room, right there in front of our bed. And I was under the care of my wonderful, wonderful midwife. So a lot of these things I actually learned from her, from my first postpartum experience, and then the second one too. It's not like I had read like a book, but I hadn't had the experience yet. You know, you learn from experience. So I should say, this isn't like medical advice. This is just like from my experience, here's some awesome supplies that I would be like, don't go into postpartum without these if you're a woman and you care at all about doing it naturally. So in no particular order, here are some items I would say definitely have these on hand if you are about to have a baby. I would say go ahead and get yourself a pack of Depends diapers. Diapers probably might not be the right word for that. I feel like this was the best hack ever because you put on those Depends and they are just stretchy and oversized. Look at me, I'm gleaming just talking about them. I could be wearing Depends right now and I would be so cozy. I'm not wearing Depends right now. I would say do those instead of pads. It doesn't feel bulky or anything. They're just wonderful and you don't have to worry, especially those first couple nights or like first night or two when you're laying. It's just like everything is covered. You're not like, oh, is the pad too far forward or too far back? And oh, I feel like I'm sitting on a log. None of that. It's just this cozy pair of undies that is super absorbent. I call it a diaper. I was calling it a diaper. I feel like it's more diaper than undies, but maybe, I don't know what its technical term is. And those are actually perfect for the next thing I would say is something to definitely have on the list. It kind of goes hand in hand, but gauze pads and honey, raw, natural honey. This is like my really up there. If someone was like, give me 3, I would say like 3 items that you're like, you have to have this. Honey is 100% on top because that raw honey is so soothing. It's antimicrobial, I think. I don't think it's antifungal, but I'm not really sure. I know it's antimicrobial. Think about honey, you think about like, ooh, soothing your sore throat. It does the same thing for your hoo-hoo after you have a baby. I would say put some on gauze pad, or you can put it directly on your Depends or your pad, doesn't really matter. But the gauze pad is nice because there were sometimes I found that I didn't really need to be changing that Depends underwear every single time I was peeing. Whereas like a pad I would probably change, but that I didn't need to change. But then if I had the honey on there, it was kind of gross and I really did feel like I wanted to change it. So to be a little less wasteful, I was just having, when my bleeding was lighter, I had a Depends on and then I would have the gauze pad. I would just paint. I literally had a butter knife in our bathroom, a jar of honey, and I would just take it and spread. I'm like spreading butters, some honey butter on a gauze pad. And then you just kind of like literally put it right up there and just like right on the surface of your vagina and pull up the Depends then. And then you can change that gauze out when you're in the bathroom. So neither of my births I tore, but I had what my midwife called skid marks both times. She was like, oh yeah, these are some pretty good skid marks. And both of them really healed in no time with the honey. And then here's another thing I would say on the add to the list is keeping your legs closed. LOL. Just don't be sitting with your legs like I'm sitting right now, like crisscross applesauce. Not a great thing. If you just are keeping your legs together, your body's gonna heal, especially if you're giving it all these little extra things like the honey and cleaning well. And anyway, keep your legs together and that will help with your healing. Another thing I would say to have in there is a peri bottle. This is probably something though that they would even recommend at the hospital. Instead of wiping, you're not going to be wiping after birth, but instead you're going to be using a peri bottle. And you can also put some Sitz bath syrup in there, which is another thing I would say have on that list. So Sitz baths are It's like a little basin, and they have some really cool ones on Amazon. I'll link below in the video. It's not the one I have, but I've seen really cool ones on Amazon. So I will link below one of those Sitz baths that are really cool because it collapses, and I just feel like that would be awesome for storage. I still have my Sitz bath, and I actually use it anytime I get like a yeast infection coming up, anything like that. I have that basin, and I will use Sitz bath herbs in that for postpartum. So there are herbs that you can get from a slew of different companies, just like herbal. I'll link some of those below too. I know Wish Garden is a really awesome one. I've gotten a lot of herbs from there. They have a really great set of options for postpartum herbs. So put some of those, you'll just like steep those herbs like you would a tea, and then you put it in this little basin. So it's like a little hat almost basin that goes on your toilet seat, and it seems odd, like you feel like, oh, how would I even touch the water in there? But for some reason it works. Like when you sit on a toilet, you'd be surprised how much goes below the surface there. So you're just filling it to the top, and you're sitting in it, and it has these like holes where anything that's extra in the basin is going to pour out into the toilet. So you're not like leaking anywhere or anything like that. But it's just a warm bath just for your vagina after you give birth. I gravitated toward wanting warmth in my supplies, I guess, postpartum. Like a lot of people really love making padsicles. So like it's where you can even put some of the Sitz bath herbs on your pad. There's so many different ways. Just Google it. There's so many different ways to do it. I know there's like witch hazel, cucumber, all different stuff you can put on a pad with a little bit of water, and then put that in your freezer and have those ready to go. Like one of my best friends like loves the cold feeling after birth, but I never liked that. I just for some reason really was like comforted by the warmth of things. So I would much rather love the Sitz bath and like a heating pad close by or something like that. Anyway, the Sitz bath herbs and the Sitz bath basin in itself, two things definitely to have on hand for postpartum. As far as what to have like medically, like medicine wise, and after having my second son, I experienced after pains, much more extreme than I did with my first son. I don't think I even took like Tylenol, ibuprofen, anything after having Theo, who was my first son, in my healing process. I just didn't like feel like I really needed it. You know, I mean, you also have like a different type of pain tolerance after that. So it's just like, yeah, I'm good. Like I'm not comfortable because everything's a little sore, but it was no big deal. After Ellis, I actually had a lot of after pains, and I wish I would have had on hand some after pains herbs. So the companies that I mentioned earlier, like Wish Garden, the one I couldn't think of the name of, they have these after pains herbs, like herbal tinctures that you can get, and those, you can be taking those like regularly. That I know that for some women that really helps them to cope with those after pains. It's basically, after pains are just your uterus contracting still to go back to normal size. And for whatever reason, after subsequent babies, it gets more and more extreme. So I'm told. I've only had 2 babies. But I can verify that after my second, I definitely experienced it. I was like chasing Tylenol, ibuprofen. Like I really needed that in order to stay ahead of that pain and get any portion of like sleep or comfort. Even with those medicines, like nursing was still like, I was still crying sometimes, and like I still felt like I was having like real contractions through those. So having that herbal tincture of after pains, like it's like after ease or something like that, having that, it would be really helpful. I'm going to definitely try that for my next birth. Like if we have more children, Lord willing, then I will definitely have that on hand. But if not that, Tylenol, ibuprofen. And then the other thing I would have on hand for like medicine wise would be arnica, which is a homeopathy type of medicine. It's their arnica pellets. They help with bruising and swelling. So especially if you're a first time mom, I know that, I mean, every birth is very different, but I know that it's like statistically, if you are having your first baby, you're probably going to be doing things a little bit longer. Like you're going to have a little bit of a longer pushing time, probably a longer labor. That's not always going to happen. But if that's the case, then you might have more swelling than you will after your other babies. Like I said, every baby comes out different. And so it's always just a different story each time. But having arnica on hand is really helpful. So for Theo, this was a really great thing for me to have on hand. I really do feel like my healing for as long as my labor was like 36-hour labor here at home, and we pushed for a while. I don't know how long we pushed, honestly, with Theo. I forget. A while, like over an hour, maybe 2. I don't really remember. I'll have to ask my husband or my mom if they remember. They were both here. I just know that for that portion of time, and I pushed standing, which is like, gravity is just like, I know that I was pretty swollen, but the swelling went down pretty easily, and I know that the arnica was really helpful. So that is something that homeopathy is, that's when I pretty much started to get dabble with homeopathy too, because I saw the healing properties of, wow, this was like very effective. Oh, one other thing I forgot to mention is to have on hand in like your medicine, vitamin cabinet is, aside from great iron supplement and magnesium, all other things, that would be really good to just replenish your body and keep taking that prenatal. I would say add to the list, if you haven't already, while at the end of your pregnancy, sunflower lecithin. I think it's how you say it, lecithin. I'm not really sure. But I know that that is so good for milk production and making sure you don't have any really clogged ducts. So with Theo, with my first son, I had clogged ducts actually pretty often. I say often throughout our nursing journey. I nursed him until he was I think 16 months old. And I was like once a month, I probably got a clogged duct, but it was like I could comb it out or whatever, do all the things to massage it out. But I was like familiar with them. I'd be like, oh, I have a clogged duct coming on. With Ellis, I have not had any clogged ducts since taking sunflower lecithin. So I had an insane postpartum. Right now I'm 8 months postpartum, but that first couple months was just insane. Like I had the weirdest postpartum experience with Ellis. I had mastitis, almost mastitis, I guess you should say. I had mastitis one full-blown time. That was terrible. I forget how old he was, maybe 4 weeks old, 5 weeks. And then kind of it was coming back, or maybe never went away. So it was like kind of coming back, and then did antibiotics, felt it coming on another time. Anyway, I have not had any issues since taking sunflower lecithin, and it just keeps your milk healthy. It just keeps your body like those ducts clear, and so I take it every single morning still. I'm like, this is a faithful thing. I would never wish mastitis on my worst enemy. That was terrible. It was like having the flu, and I had it like this almost 3 times. I had yeast infections. I had all sorts of crazy stuff with Ellis. My hemorrhoids just healed like a couple weeks ago. So for 7 months, I felt like I was pooping glass shards after having my baby. So this postpartum experience has been just wild. Very different from my first, where it was like, maybe it took a little bit of time to heal up in that initial time. And the whirlwind of having your first baby. But other than that, it was like, all right, we're just cruising and trying to figure out what life is with a baby. This time was like all up and down and crazy. So anyway, I would definitely recommend having sunflower lecithin on hand, or just knowing where you're going to buy it if you feel like, okay, so I'm prone to clogged ducts. I think some women just are and some women aren't. So the last thing I can think to mention is to recommend a book. I'd recommend this book to any mama who's like, hey, I really just want to learn how to care for myself well in the postpartum time, or how can I coach my husband to care for me well, or my mom, or whoever's going to be with you. I would say read the book, The First 40 Days. It is just about the foods. It's about the first 40 days postpartum and how other cultures, I think it takes a lot from, I actually want to say it's like ancient Chinese medicine, but it's a wonderful read, and you'll have recipe ideas in that book. And it taught me like, wow, okay, so there's things that my body really needs in this time. And so I read that, I think right before having Theo, but the whirlwind of having your first is kind of crazy. And then I saw firsthand those things. I read it again. And then as I was caring for myself after my second baby, I recognized so many more things that were in that book. Like things like, I know this sounds like very like new agey, new world stuff, but they talk about like your chi being out of balance, and like after you have a baby, like your chi is off balance, which is like your aura, your zen is like out of whack. And there's a time period, those first 40 days, where you're healing and your body is in a state of cold or something. It's like a cold state. And so I recognized that with after Theo, but never like put the dots together until after Ellis, where I am freezing postpartum. Like I'm cold. I mean, except for like night sweats and like weird hormonal stuff. Like if my back has like a draft on it, I will feel like frozen. Like I just feel super cold. I know like because I'm up nursing at night, and I'll like recognize like, oh my word, I'm so cold, but it's like hot. Like my husband's over there sweating because our room is warm. So anyway, I learned a lot from that book, and lots of recipes and things. But the number one thing I took away that I'm like, we do a terrible job of how we're fueling our bodies. What are we eating postpartum, especially like really newly postpartum? And one of the things that they mention is warming liquids. Like you don't need anything cold, any ice, any smoothies. It's just not beneficial to your body. Get yourself some broth, some soups, eat those warm meals. If a neighbor's going to bring it over, someone from church is bringing you a warm meal, basically heat whatever you can up. I don't remember if it was in that book or somewhere else, but someone's like, I just heat up my water. So it's like, nothing is cold. You're going to be helping your body heal quicker if it's not working extra hard, if you're not working against it and giving it things that it doesn't need or want in that time period. So that's the things off the top of my head, like that's my list of like, this is what's in my closet. And I would say my closet. That's where you keep the birth supplies. Those are the things I would say, like, have these on hand for a natural healing time. And take care of yourself, mama. you're gonna be busy taking care of all your little people, but it's also important that you can just do these little things to care for yourself. So if you have any questions, I'm sure that I said things but not thoroughly. So if you have any questions, please comment below and I will answer your questions about any of those postpartum healing supplies. And I'll catch you next time, keepers. Bye.